I'm Emily Chang, and this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up, Microsoft takes over 6 websites created by a group with ties to the Russian government and plans to meddle in the U.S. midterm elections. Plus, more manipulation on social media. Facebook and Twitter take down hundreds of accounts linked to Russia and Iran. And as Elon Musk faces scrutiny from the SEC, investors, and the public at large, is he still the right person for the Tesla CEO job? But first, to our top story, Microsoft says it thwarted an attempt by hackers tied to the Russian military to disrupt the U.S. midterm elections. The company's digital crimes unit shut down 6 web domains meant to mimic sites victims might expect to get email from or visit, like Senate.group. The group believed to be responsible is called Strontium. We spoke with Microsoft President and Chief Legal Officer Brad Smith about the situation.
We're very confident that these 6 domains were set up and were put together to be used to harvest email credentials or passwords by this group Strontium. It is the 84th time since 2016. This is the 12th order that we have obtained to go address the activities of this group, which we believe understand very well. And what we're seeing now is a pattern that in many respects is similar to what we saw in the United States in 2016 when certain campaigns and political parties were attacked. It is similar to the pattern that we saw in France in 2017 when we really saw every major candidate for the French presidency targeted. We're seeing it again.
Now, you got to these particular websites early, and there's no evidence that they were actually used to propagate any sort of attacks. But if they had been successful, how do you think they would have contributed or could have contributed to threats against democracy as you describe it?
Well, you're right. We were able to act quickly enough that we don't believe there were any successful attacks in this instance. But what people attempt to do in this kind of situation is set up an internet domain, create a website, use a name that looks very similar to the name that people would expect to see. It has 3 of them had the word Senate in it. One had the letters IRI. That's the acronym for the International Republican Institute. Employees or board members or members of the Senate might then start to receive emails. They would be told that there's a problem, for example, with their account, that they need to go to this website. They would go to that site. It would look like the Senate site or the IRI site. They would be asked to enter in their email name and password. Once that happens, then it's off to the races, unfortunately, for these kinds of attacks, because then the attackers will attempt to use that to access people's email, to download all their email, to access the broader networks on which sensitive documents might be stored.
One of the websites, the domain name was Senate.group, for example. Now, did any of this activity start, or has any of the activity that you've seen started or ramped up after that summit in Helsinki between President Trump and President Putin?
I don't think that we can connect this to any specific event like the summit in Helsinki or anything like that. I think we can see it as more generalized as taking place in 2018 as we approach the midterm elections. And I think it's also significant in this instance, as we've said, that this is a focus not just on, say, Democrats, but the IRI, the International Republican Institute, the Hudson Institute, more on the conservative side of the political spectrum. We're seeing a broadening to address these kinds of think tanks and both political parties, which is exactly what we saw in France last year.
Now, you're also announcing that you are expanding Microsoft's Defending Democracy program. You're providing cybersecurity to federal, state, and local candidates, campaigns, think tanks, political organizations. Why is Microsoft so active in this arena compared to other tech companies?
Well, I actually think that there are a number of tech companies doing more. At Microsoft, we recognize first we're in the business of ensuring the cybersecurity of our customers. Many of these candidates and campaigns and political parties and think tanks are our customers. We want to provide, with this new Account Guard initiative, state-of-the-art cybersecurity protection at no extra cost so that they're really on a par with our most sophisticated enterprise customers. And we want to do this both because these are our customers and because I think we all have a responsibility to do more.
That was Microsoft President Brad Smith. Meantime, Facebook and Twitter said they removed hundreds of fake accounts aimed at manipulating global politics. The twist this time, another country besides Russia has been implicated, and that is Iran. Facebook said it shut down 652 pages, groups, and accounts that originated in Iran, and also took down an undisclosed number linked to the Russian military. Meantime, Twitter suspended 284 accounts. Many, it says, are also from Iran. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg described Facebook's finding in a call with reporters.
We believe these pages, groups, and accounts were part of two separate sets of campaigns. First, a set of activity from Iran, including from some with ties to state-owned media. And second, a set of activity that the U.S. government and others have publicly linked to Russian military intelligence services. We've been investigating some of these campaigns for months now, which highlights the tension we face in every investigation between removing bad actors quickly and improving our defenses over time.
We asked Bloomberg Tech cybersecurity reporter Jordan Robertson to weigh in.
This is a really good sign that these organizations, Facebook and others, are taking active steps to eliminate these kinds of disinformation accounts. The fact that Iran is getting in on the disinformation game as well, possibly related to our elections, or at least the election season, is obviously not a great sign. I mean, what it shows is that we all continue to be vulnerable to disinformation on the web, especially on social media platforms such as Facebook. These organizations don't do these things because there's no value in them. So it's a reminder that going into election season here, we all need to be really vigilant about things that look suspicious online might deserve some further scrutiny.
Is there any evidence, though, that these campaigns were specifically designed to influence the U.S. midterm elections or to just sow sort of general misinformation?
It's a good question. I think it's probably hard to tell, but it's probably a little bit of both. The way I look at it is, this is still election season. So whether these are campaigns that are designed to influence a particular congressional district one way or the other, that remains to be seen. We haven't seen that from the data that's been released. But what does seem apparent is that election season is kind of high tide for these organizations, these attacker groups, to sow their disinformation campaigns, because this is when people are paying attention to politics. This is when people are, assessing their own political views and taking in political information. So in that sense, it makes perfect sense that this would be the time for those attacks.
Now, on this call with press, Mark Zuckerberg took a similar refrain: security is an arms race. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Security is not something that you ever fully solve. Our adversaries are sophisticated and well-funded, and we have to constantly keep improving to stay ahead. But the shift we've made from reactive to proactive detection is a big change, and it's going to make Facebook safer for everyone over time.
That said, Facebook discovered these pages acting on a tip from the cybersecurity firm FireEye, and we certainly know that they bungled their response to Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Does it make you wonder, Jordan, well, is China doing this too? Could North Korea be doing this as well? Could the U.S. be using Facebook to do similar things in other countries?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think to your first point, it obviously is a great sign that we're seeing a different Facebook now regarding this issue of fake news and disinformation than we did before 2016. I think a lot of executives kind of dismissed this idea of fake news as being something that would be kind of irrelevant. So we're seeing a very different Facebook. They are being proactive. They are promoting these efforts. And I think that's ultimately a really good thing. It reminds people these efforts are still out there. But to your point as well, there's absolutely no reason to believe that other countries are not using the platform platform for the exact same purposes. But from Facebook's perspective, this is a hard problem to solve, like some of the Russian examples that came out in 2016, like where they pretended to be Black Lives Matter, activist pages. Their propaganda didn't look too dissimilar from actual promotional materials for Black Lives Matter events. The intentions and the motivations were completely different, but it's very hard to distinguish sometimes between, state-sponsored propaganda and legitimate activist content. It all depends on the aim.
Bloomberg's Jordan Robertson there. Well, after 3 years of searching, Uber has announced a new CFO, Merrill Lynch veteran Nelson Chai. He's a longtime banking executive who weathered the 2008 financial crisis. He will help guide the ride-hailing company through a planned initial public offering late next year. After Dara Khosrowshahi took over as CEO in September, finding an experienced financial executive became one of his top priorities. Coming up, snapping back, how the social media company behind Snapchat is hoping to regain success. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Singapore's ride-hailing and food delivery company Grab is rolling out its very own advertising service. Grab ads will be incorporated in its fleet of vehicles in over 200-plus cities in Southeast Asia, where drivers and delivery partners can earn as much as 10% in additional income. Grab ads will offer 3 broad categories, including mobile billboards, in-car options like digital displays, and in-app advertising. Well, after a disastrous redesign, declining daily use, and an inability to turn a profit, Snap is trying to rebound. Much of the blame for Snap's troubles has fallen on CEO Evan Spiegel. For 4 of the 6 quarters since its March 2017 IPO, Snap has posted revenue numbers that missed estimates. And in that time, Spiegel has also lost or replaced his heads of engineering, finance, hardware, legal, product, and sales. We talked to Bloomberg Tech's Sarah Fryer, who spent time with the Snap CEO for her newest piece in Bloomberg Business Week.
He's read the critiques of his management style, including those in Bloomberg that say he has this very dictatorial way of managing, that he's a secret keeper, that he doesn't get everyone on the same page, that he hates criticism. And his response to that is, well, I understand why you'd think that because you don't know me. So this is his attempt to say, listen, I'm a shy guy. I don't really talk about what I like or what I do, and I'm trying to get better at that. He hired a management coach. He's trying to do all-hands meetings with his employees. These are the basics of running a company that has about 3,000 employees now, just starting to really think about that in terms of Snap.
To that point, it's not just about the perception of him from the outside, but the perception of him from his own employees. He told you, I had a pretty serious Christian upbringing. I remember growing up, I was taught to be small, be a turtle. I remember thinking, why would I go around the company and just chat with people? That would be so awkward. Now I go walk around the office and get a ton of emails like, oh my God, that was awesome you came by. Do you get a sense that the mood or the culture of the company itself is changing?
Well, the biggest thing that's changed in the culture may not be something that Evan did himself, but really just the geographical, physical space that Snap employees are working in. They used to be in dozens of scattered buildings in the beach town Venice, where there was a lot of tension with neighbors. People barely saw each other, weren't really allowed to visit each other in offices they didn't have access to. And now they're in this nice business park in Santa Monica with the same kind of free food and drink that you'd get in Silicon Valley. It seems much more corporate. They have those monthly all-hands meetings that you would get at another company. So in those ways, it is getting a little better, but I talked to some former employees today who read my story and said, this is not going to change. Evan is who he is.
You also write in your story, you make a very good point that with Facebook and Twitter battling fake news and misinformation, online harassment, this could have been Snap's moment to shine, but they haven't been able to take advantage of it. Why not?
Well, Evan thinks that it's really at the core of it is that Snap hasn't communicated to the public how different they are from these other players, namely Facebook. Isn't the product
itself supposed to do that for them?
Yes, but this product is hard to use. They don't really advertise it. It's very it's one of those things that its coolness comes from trying to figure it out and understanding where to swipe and how to really learn to communicate with it. That's why it's so popular with young people, but their parents are just befuddled. And so they have added Polly Thorpe of Glossier to their board. That's one of the people they think is really going to help them tell this brand story. Spiegel has been talking with his mentors on the board and a management coach, Stephen Miles, who's coached other managers through tough times. And he says that he's committed to trying to make that point clearer to the public. But so far, it hasn't really quite worked.
I guess I wonder with Snap users hitting a plateau, similar to what we've seen at Twitter, if there's really, I mean, can they reaccelerate growth?
I mean, this is the same thing we saw with Twitter, right? People thought that Twitter was going to be the next Facebook, and then now they've sort of become okay with Twitter being a more niche product than Facebook. And Snap is trying to prove that there's a hunger for a kind of communication that's not permanent. But of course, Facebook has capitalized on that popularity and built Snap's functionality into its own products, which makes people even less likely to download the Snap app if they think they're getting the same thing from an Instagram. And the ads on Snap, it's one of those problems where they have to put them in the media portion of the app, and their users are using it for communicating with friends. They have to make sure that the users also want to go and see the stories from publishers. So it's going to be a very complicated road.
That was Bloomberg's Sarah Frier. Coming up, John Chambers' next chapter. The former Cisco CEO is making a big bet on the cloud, joining the board of the data management company Rubrik. We will hear from him and Rubrik's CEO next. First Lady Melania Trump told a cyberbullying conference this week that social media can be used in many positive ways or can be destructive when used improperly. She was speaking at a conference attended by tech companies like Google, Facebook, and Twitter. The First Lady used her time to highlight her Be Best campaign, saying it will focus on teaching the next generation how to, quote, conduct themselves safely and in a positive manner in an online setting. This as her husband, the president, has been accused of using Twitter to bully his critics. Well, the cloud data management company Rubrik lured a high-profile tech name to invest in the company and join the board. Former CEO of Cisco, John Chambers, launched his new venture, JC2, at the start of this year to find the next generation of tech and has now turned his focus to Rubrik. We caught up with Chambers and Bipul Sinha, Rubrik CEO, about where they go from here.
What's exciting is whatever I do with a replicatable innovation playbook, if you will, doing 180 acquisitions in Cisco as an example. So when I look at startups, I've been very fortunate to almost get my pick of the litter on a global basis. Not sure I deserve that, but the VCs and the CEOs have been very kind. So I look for a market transition that is both a business model change and a technology change. I look for a world-class CEO in the making who wants to be coached, who's wicked smart. I look for customers who say, this is a company that you ought to invest in, and if you'd help them grow and scale, they could be a huge player in the industry. Then I look for the key industry analysts or VCs that I trust. What Rubrik has is all the above. It's right at the center of the cloud evolution and how you are just inundated with data, and yet the ability to get that from various public and private clouds in a secure way. Their customer list, I mean, when you talk to the customers, they gush over how exciting this company is and how valuable it is to them. And then the VCs, when you ask them about it, they say, John, this is my favorite play. So world-class CEO that I believe in one of the hottest areas. I'll make a prediction. This will be one of the hot stocks of this next decade.
So you think it's going to go public, not be an acquisition target?
I hope that it goes public, and we'll share with you why I think that. That's job creation, and I want to see more jobs created in this country.
So Bipul, you're taking on companies like Dell EMC. These are very established incumbents. What do you think is the unmet opportunity here?
As businesses are grappling with the data and data growth around the world, and as the cloud is coming into the picture, everybody is looking at a single platform that can span from on-premises to the cloud. And Rubrik was born in the cloud era, and whereas all the other companies that we compete with were born before cloud, before virtualization. So we are uniquely positioned to take advantage of the cloud opportunity. In fact, our growth in some ways is indexed to the growth of the cloud.
You know what's exciting, Emily? You look at the numbers: 5 million, 50 million, 150 million, over 300 million this year, 250 people just 18 months ago, 1,200 today. It is a growth opportunity that's going to be really exciting. But what's hard for your readers to grasp is what makes this exciting to me. It's a platform for the future in data management. It is the next Cisco, if you will, potentially, or the next Dell, or the next SAP, or the next Oracle.
All right, well, that's a very high recommendation. Bipul, one of your services targets ransomware, which is the process by which hackers take control of a company's data, then hold it for ransom.
Yep.
Essentially, it's been a very difficult problem for the industry to solve. We've seen some high-profile ransomware attacks in Atlanta, the NotPetya attack, which actually crippled computers around the world. Is it getting harder to stop this, or easier because now they're becoming more high-profile and hackers are seeing the impact?
Hackers are always finding newer ways to attack, so it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game. We looked at this problem at Rubrik at the architecture level and said that can we build a platform that is immune to current attacks and future attacks, and that's what Rubrik does. We uniquely built a platform that is an immutable data management system where hackers cannot get to, and we are helping like hospitals and law firms and very large global businesses around the world to not only detect ransomware through our radar platform as SaaS, but also to mitigate the ransomware problems through instant recovery across all of their applications.
Meantime, we're hearing new information from Facebook and Twitter about attempts to meddle in the U.S. election. We're in the middle now, John, of a trade war, having run one of the biggest enterprise companies in the world for 2 decades. What are your biggest concerns about the sort of state of the U.S. economy? Well,
first, on the U.S. economy, it's stronger than most people realize. When you talk to citizens out there, their paychecks are going up. They know they've got a good job, or they can find another good job. The enterprise CEOs are probably as bullish on the economy as I've seen them in a decade.
Is a trade war a good approach?
Well, no. Trade war is an undesirable outcome. But I do think we had to get a fair trading position with our global peers. And I think for many years, China was a great win-win partner. I think over the last decade that has developed into win-lose. We have to correct that. But it's in China's best interest and the U.S. best interest to solve that. But what's exciting is you look at what's going on in countries like India that are growing GDP at 7 to 10%, and the relationship's never been stronger. You look what's going on in Europe. So I think we'll work through these challenges. And unfortunately, Emily, I think this is more the new status quo. There are always going to be bumps and uncertainties. They're going to occur at a faster and faster pace. World-class countries or world-class companies will steer the way through that.
There are some pretty big potential bumps in the future. In fact, President Trump said today that he thinks the stock market would crash if he is impeached. It's hard to believe that we're even talking about this, but we are. I mean, do you think there's any truth to that, the impeachment of a president, or even that kind of statement? Is it scary when a president says such a thing?
Well, one of the fun things about the job I do is I coach the young CEOs how to handle difficult questions. So, people, that is yours. Let me take it. The answer is the market does not like uncertainty. And I think what you've seen is with a strong economy and finally getting GDP growth back above 4% and full employment and people getting raises, it gets nervous when there is uncertainty. But I do think that is the new norm. And our country's always been able to navigate through that. And I think we're making changes on tax law that needed to be done. We're finally getting the average American to really have a raise, which we haven't done before. My worry is actually something different. I think our nation is losing its innovation image. We used to be #1 in innovation. We didn't even make Bloomberg's top 10 innovation countries. We used to, during the mid-90s, when you were generating 22.5 million jobs in 8 years, we took 700 plus companies public per year. Now we're barely going to get over 200 this year. Startups are almost at a 20-year low. So I think we need to become the innovation country again and the startup engine again. That's actually what I lose sleep over. And it's why I want to see both role models, but also our country get back to being the very best in the world in startups and job creation.
That was John Chambers, JC2 Ventures CEO, along with Bipul Sinha, CEO of Rubrik. Coming up, it's Tesla versus the SEC. We look at how regulators could stand in the way of Elon Musk's take-private dream. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. During Elon Musk's emotional interview with the New York Times this week, he defended his work ethic and made mention of his quick trip to Spain for his brother's wedding. The trip was described as a quick dash, in and out. Musk even expressed having barely enough time to savor the moment, saying he arrived 2 hours before the ceremony and returned to Tesla's factory floor immediately after. However, Bloomberg News pieced together the details of Musk's trip from his own tweets and flight data. He attended his brother's wedding in Spain and then took his kids to Belfast so they could see the set of Game of Thrones. For 5 days this summer, in fact, Tesla actually survived without Elon Musk on the factory floor. So, should Musk's relentless work ethic be defended? We spoke with the author of the best-selling Elon Musk biography, Bloomberg's Ashley Vance.
If you go back in Elon's history and Tesla's history, in 2008 was really a crisis that was sort of like we're at with Tesla now, where the future of the company was uncertain. It was going towards bankruptcy, and Elon was under arguably as much pressure as he was now. And you know, back then he would do similar things. He would give his employees a really hard time. He went after the press that was really bagging on Tesla. But I think he was not as famous back then. The companies were not as successful, and so there was not as much attention on all of this. This time around, you've got Elon on Twitter, and so this is the first time the public has seen all sides of Elon that only his employees and his family used to see before. You've got Tesla being this huge success now, so there's a lot more pressure on him, and so, you know, I think it's kind of this public crucible that's very strange to witness.
There's also this level of untruthfulness that he seems to be walking right into, you know, not only tweeting something that could have been untruthful, that funding was secured when in fact it appears that it was not, you know, saying that he dashed in and out of his brother's wedding when his own tweets show that he didn't do just that. I mean, how concerning is that? It's
pretty strange. So, in my experience with Elon, is, you know, I think he's always been a fundamentally truthful guy. Although there have been those moments where he definitely chooses his words carefully, and you could interpret them different ways. This time is definitely different. I mean, he's getting caught in sort of making things up. There was another interview on CBS where he talked about, I would never go on vacation while my workers are suffering like this, but on Instagram he had these posts where he took his kids to Petra and Jordan and Israel, and so it's another sort of strange thing where it's hard to match up.
Well, and look, I'm glad he's taking his kids on vacation. He should be able to take a vacation. He should be able to sleep.
Absolutely. You don't want to criticize this guy. Definitely works harder than just about anyone, and people are entitled to vacations. It's like, why is he? All of this stuff is sort of shooting himself in the foot. It's like, why would you say this to the New York Times when you know it's relatively easy to stitch things together? And so this is kind of the difference, I think. He's been under this pressure before, but this time around, it seems to either be too much or there's just too much going on in his life, and it seems to be kind of like overwhelming him on some level.
Now, at the same time that he was supposedly doing this quick dash in and out and actually wasn't on the factory floor, Tesla, I have a chart in my GTV library, hit that 5,000 Model 3s a week milestone. And so there's this question, how much does Tesla really need him to be there 24+ hours a day?
Yeah, it's funny for me, having done the book on him and spent all this time with these employees. It's very hard for me to separate Tesla from Elon and to sort of imagine these two companies apart. It's also hard to imagine them keeping up this pace and hitting these milestones without him being this figure. Even though he's away for 5 days, the aura of Elon continues to go through the company. You know, I'm sure he was checking his emails and letting people have it, even from far away. And so I don't know if he has to. I think he takes a lot on where he feels this personal responsibility to make this company succeed, and it's this cross he has to bear. I don't know if he has to be there quite as much as he thinks he does, but I also don't think the company would push itself as hard without him.
Now, he talked about trying to hire a number 2, including Sheryl Sandberg, and you and I actually talked about this a couple of years ago. He looked a few times for a number 2. He's never been able to find one. Does he really want a number 2, and why hasn't that happened?
I don't think so. This has been going on for a long time, even before Sheryl and people like Tony Bates, who was the CEO of Skype. I know he had a meeting with Elon, but way before that, Tony Fadell was brought in at one point to possibly be what he thought was the CEO of Tesla, and Elon envisioned as much more like a COO type role, and so you had this disconnect on who's doing what, and so that fell through. But that was 6, 7, 8 years ago, and so this has been going on forever. So you get the feeling that Elon is setting the bar incredibly high and has some sort of hang up about being able to turn over this control, which is funny too, because if you look at Gwynne Shotwell, who's the president of SpaceX, she's been doing that for many years, and it's worked great. SpaceX, which should be the harder company, is the more consistent, reliable company of the two.
Which also potentially goes to show the value of a number 2 if he was able to find one. I mean, at the end of the New York Times interview, he's talked about, well, if you can find another COO who can do the job better than me, they can have the job. He doesn't mean that, does he? I
don't think he really means it. Right? I think he probably does mean it, but he would never believe somebody could do it as good or better than him. And so it's the same thing. He's gone through a lot of PR people in the past, and he's brought in the top people from all over the industry, people who had worked in the car industry, people who had done other sort of high-flying jobs, and then ultimately Elon ends up doing the PR himself, and he has this thing where he wants to take it all on.
Let's talk a little bit about his relationship with the board, because there are a number of directors on this board who are also on SpaceX's board or also investors in SpaceX, people who he has personal friendships with. Does this board actually have any control over Elon Musk, and will they call him on his mistakes, of which in the past couple of weeks it seems there have been a few, or does he just get to run free here?
I think he probably gets to run a lot more free than most CEOs, but it's only recently that the board has taken on some people that you would consider more independent. Certainly, the people that were there were the ones who, the biggest chunk of the board are people that have been with Elon since Tesla was gonna go bankrupt, was gonna get blown off the face of the earth, and so I think they put a lot more faith in him than probably a lot of board members would, because they've seen that this company would not exist without Elon, and so they think they give him an extraordinary amount of leeway. I think at this point, you've got to say, get off Twitter, just stay out of the press for a while, stop doing these self-inflicted wounds. You've got so much on your plate, just like let this other stuff go.
Now, a huge part of your reporting was driven by current and former Tesla employees. What do you imagine they think of all of this controversy, along with the idea that their company could be going private, or at least he wants it to, which means they would lose their liquidity? I
think the feeling that I get from a lot of former Tesla employees is a feeling of shock. They've certainly seen hard-charging Elon, difficult Elon, flamboyant Elon, all of that stuff before, but I think they feel there's a different tenor to what's going on now, and it would be, I think for them and in the bigger picture overall, it would be, he's put himself in a real difficult situation now after saying he was going to take the company private and setting all these wheels in motion. And if this doesn't work out, if Tesla can't hit these manufacturing targets, I mean, the company is in a fair amount of peril, and it would be sad to see it sort of crumble at this point.
Right. So if it doesn't work out, which most people have told us they think there's zero chance, what then happens to Elon Musk? Is he still the right person to run this company?
I'm sure there's a lot of people who would argue no. I mean, to me, it's just hard. I think the company could definitely benefit with somebody who, the biggest problem Tesla has always faced is this manufacturing problem. Mm-hmm. And if you look at something like Apple, you had someone like Tim Cook Steve Jobs was the visionary. Tim Cook was this boring supply chain guy who made sure all the factories were humming along. Apple was doing good deals. Tesla clearly needs someone of that caliber to come in and fix the machinery of the company, and Elon could still do his Elon thing. It's impossible for me to imagine Tesla without him, and for it to have anywhere near the same value or cachet or brand.
Bloomberg's Ashley Vance there. And one of the most anticipated questions since Musk tweeted funding secure when he announced his desire to go private was, what is the SEC doing about this? Since that tweet, there have been multiple reports of ongoing inquiries. For an insider's view of what goes on at the SEC at a time like this, we spoke to Teresa Goody, CEO of the Goody Group, before founding the international business consulting firm. She served as an attorney for the SEC.
The inquiry is already pretty serious if they're issuing subpoenas, so that means that there is a formal investigation in place. And after the voluntary request, once there's a formal investigation, that's when you actually get the subpoenas. So the SEC is indeed acting very swiftly, as you said, and quickly here, and pursuing this investigation full force ahead, it appears.
What is the most problematic part of the tweet? Is it simply those two words, funding secured?
Well, there's a few different steps here of problems. So the funding secured, saying that you actually have funding secured when it's not, that's problematic because it's not true, which is fraud. And so that would be a fraudulent statement. There's another rule saying that you can't say you're going to make a tender offer if you don't indeed have the funding to do so or reasonably believe that you do. And so saying that was problematic. And then the blog indicating, that funding wasn't secured, and then the New York Times, that interview was also alarming, also in the fact that it appears that the $420 per share offer price was really arbitrary. It wasn't based on any kind of analysis. And then it was better karma for $420 rather than $419. So that was problematic. And then additionally, what was extremely alarming to me in that interview was that Elon Musk still doesn't seem to think that he did anything wrong and doesn't regret his tweets, which I think the SEC is going to look at that very seriously as somebody who's continuing to act in this reckless manner without any idea or concern about what he's done.
Now, what penalties could Musk himself face as well as the company face? Because as I understand it, each violation or each false statement to each person to whom it is made could count as a separate infraction.
You're exactly right there. Every time he made a false statement, that itself is a separate violation. And fraud carries with it not only civil penalties with the SEC, but there's also potential criminal wrongdoing with the DOJ. And then you, of course, already have the shareholder lawsuits here. And another impact that this could have with the SEC is if they do, in fact, bring an enforcement action against him and they do settle, they could also require admissions. And so admissions of guilt here, which would also have an effect in the shareholder and the criminal suits as well.
To each person to whom it is made, does that include multiple different shareholders, or is one statement one infraction, if you will?
Well, the one statement would be the infraction, but then the egregiousness and the impact of it is based on all of the various shareholders who were injured. And so here you have a very dramatic and extensive financial harm. I mean, we saw the wide swings with the share price, and so you have tons of money that was lost by the shorts. You have tons of money that was lost by those who bought shares, thinking that there was funding secured for taking this private, and it seems as though funding is very far from secured, and so you have them losing money. So there's each violation of the statements, but also the collective huge financial ramifications from this.
The subpoena also demands information from each of the board's 9 directors. Could any of them be liable?
Indeed, they could, and the company could be liable itself. And so we have here Elon Musk, who appears to have gone off on his personal, on his own personal way of doing this and saying all of these in his personal capacity, but he also is the CEO. And then once he makes these statements, then the board collectively also has fiduciary duties. And so I was a little surprised that I didn't see them make a very quick corrective disclosure under Reg FD as soon as these tweets came out to clear up the confusion and the chaos in the market. So they could also have some liability there. And then the SEC, it does not look at anything in a vacuum, so it's going to be looking into everything, and including these communications. And so if they were aware of the tweet before it happened, or what was going on afterwards, if there was any intent that's there, you can see if there was anything untoward, whether they were trying, there was some effort to have an impact on the stock price, and there was an intent there, whether or not they reacted reasonably and responsibly. And so you do also have the board having these responsibilities and acting on behalf of the company and could have liability itself, as well as Elon Musk. It is noteworthy that Chairman Clayton of the SEC has indicated that to him it is more important to go after the individual wrongdoer, but by no means do I think that excludes the possibility that the SEC could bring an action against the company as well as Elon Musk.
And when you say there could be criminal ramifications here, does that mean, you know, what could that mean for Elon Musk personally? I mean, could that mean jail time?
It's possible. That is a possibility. And with fraud comes the possibility of jail time as well as fines. And so fines are generally the means that the DOJ takes more often than jail time, but it is definitely a possibility.
That was Teresa Goody, CEO of the Goody Group. Coming up, the UK-based marketplace for high-end fashion Farfetched has confirmed its plans to go public on the NYSE. We will take a look at the year of tech IPOs so far next. This is Bloomberg. Apple and Google face a brewing revolt over the App Store tax. A number of companies say the tech giants are charging too much to connect consumers to developer products. Netflix is just one of the companies trying to bypass the app stores. If the movement picks up, it could put a dent in Apple and Google's profits. Well, we are halfway through the year, and we've already seen a number of tech companies hit the public market. Dropbox, Spotify, DocuSign, Sonos, all making their debut. If the pace holds for the rest of 2018, the number of tech IPOs in the United States will have returned to levels not seen since a tech IPO mini boom in 2013 and 2014. So how will the rest of the year play out? Jackie Kelly, EY America's IPO leader, and Bloomberg IPO reporter Alex Barinka weighed in.
Technology in particular has been exceedingly active, and I know we've been waiting for this to come back. The last couple quarters have actually been exciting. We are definitely seeing technology companies themselves and tech-enabled businesses in general just really, really eager to get out. And I think a lot of this is driven by the fact that we've been in such a strong economic market now for a number of years. Everybody wants to make sure they access this window.
So will it continue, though? What is the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think Q4 and especially Q1 are going to be very, very busy markets for us.
I'm curious, though, this bull market has been going on for so long. Those conditions haven't really changed outside of that little hiccup in 2015. Why now? Why are these companies deciding now is the time, when I think back to last year, the year before, when everyone was saying it's going to be next year, it's going to be next year? What is actually different?
Well, valuations were high at the beginning of the year, and then we took this dip, and they're now almost back up that level again. I think folks are saying, you know, what's the chance this is going to happen again? These markets are great. I'm hearing it from a lot of companies. They're watching their competitors, and they're saying now's the time to move.
Are we talking recession concerns here? Is it a broader valuation issue?
You know, I think there's a little of everything. I think people have just said this economy has been so strong for so long. Can this hold on? And we're talking about maybe having, you know, hitting the longest run in history. So I think there's a feeling of, will the market be this good a year from now? I'm not sure. Let's go now if we can.
And yet you say 2019 is the year of the unicorn. What do you mean by that?
You know, we have been talking like, when are the unicorns coming? When are the unicorns coming? I actually think they're coming in 2019. Now, it may not be
Uber and Airbnb?
You know, I think that we're going to see a lot of unicorns. We'll see who's ready to go. But I will tell you, we work with a lot of those companies, and they're really preparing themselves today to get ready.
I want to talk a little bit about the dynamics in the private market and how that is affecting the pipeline here. Alex, you brought up an interview we did with venture capitalist Bill Gurley back in February at the Goldman Sachs Tech Conference, where he talked about how venture capitalists have given, because of the competitiveness, they've hesitated to put pressure on companies to go public at all. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Hyper competition has made it so that the majority of VC's biggest fear is missing out on the next investment. And so they're afraid to have a reputation as someone who asks too many questions or push too hard. And I think it's led to a situation where there's not a lot of stewardship for discipline and results and that kind of thing.
Is that are we in that same state right now?
It seems a little bit like folks are coming to a reality check. I don't know if that's because the venture capitalists have made out so well on a lot of these IPOs, but you have people coming to the realization that that comfortable space being private without those folks on your board who probably aren't pushing you to get public, or it's not the same scrutiny as public markets, that dynamic is changing. Drew Houston, the CEO of Dropbox, was in last week at our Players Tech Conference, and he told me he's really happy he went out. He's okay with the scrutiny. So that's a very different message than kind of the Silicon Valley groupthink was 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, and at Uber, of course, we have a changing of the guard, and you know, who knows if 2019 would have been the year if Travis Kalanick was still in charge. But Dara Khosrowshahi has come in and said, no, we're going to do this by 2019, we think. You know, what is the role, Jackie, that you see venture capitalists actually playing here in encouraging or discouraging or hands-off approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think investors play a significant role in this, and many of them are encouraging their companies to look at if they are ready to go public. Now, especially those where they've been in the deals for 7, 10 years, many of these unicorn companies, it's starting to reach that range. And so they're challenging management to be ready. We do a number of things such as like IPO readiness assessments where we go throughout the company and we say, are you ready to operate like a public company? That sort of functional readiness combined with, do you have a strong growth story, which obviously management owns that, especially leadership. You know, if that, can you execute on a strong growth story and operate a predictable business? If those things are in alignment, yes, you're ready to go.
That was Jackie Kelly, EY America's IPO leader, and Bloomberg IPO reporter Alex Barinka. Coming up, we hear from an analyst who warns a slowdown is coming to Apple next year. Why? We'll discuss. This is Bloomberg. This week, Apple was issued its only sell rating on the street. New Street research analyst Pierre Ferragu downgraded Apple to sell from neutral, stating he believes that the iPhone X has been so successful, sales next year are likely to be disappointing. We caught up with Ferragu to explain his outlook.
What's going to be disappointing is the aftermath of how successful 2018 has been. Our perspective is that the iPhone X has been extremely successful, very well received by consumers, and to such an extent that we think between 10 and 20 million consumers actually brought forward the refresh of their iPhone, the replacement of their iPhone, because they were attracted by the iPhone X. So that's a great success. Apple probably this year will have sold in fiscal 2018, 65 million iPhone X. We think 10 to 20 million of these are actually brought forward demand. So when you fast forward to 2019, what happens? These people who just bought an iPhone X and do not replace their phone every year are not going to buy a phone. And that's creating an air pocket. And we see a very significant risk on expectations for 2019 in terms of iPhone shipment units and also in terms of ASP, because of course the iPhone X is a high price phone that drives ASPs up. And as it happens, investors will realize that we are not done with the weakness in iPhone demand. We are like in a multi-year period of transition where iPhone users still like very much their phone and use it every single day, but they replace it less often. And this transition already happened in the PC market between 2012 and 2017, over 5 years. And PC shipments declined by 30% over that period of time. So it's a very long and very tough headwind that weighs on iPhone shipments. And this is something investors have forgotten in 2018. Because Apple did very well with the iPhone X. Most of that performance is demand being brought forward and calls for an air pocket in 2019.
That was New Street Research analyst Pierre Ferragu. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. We will bring you all the latest in tech throughout the week. Tune in each day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.